So he came into my room, he aimed the gun at my head, and I heard the gunfire. Everybody freaked out. I thought I was dead. By the grace of the Lord, man. I don't know. I turned into a Christian real quick. That bullet got stuck in that barrel and it didn't hit me. But ever since that day, I feel like that old me in me kind of died because I should have been dead. I beat the ever living shit out of this guy like never before. Nice to meet you. You can call me Grimbane. I'm a man of simple wants and desires. I have a bit of a story that I want to share. It's a bit of a painful story, and there's a lot of things that, thanks to coming to this world in VR, I've been able to open up. I am 30 plus years old. A lot of people are sometimes shocked to know that, like, what are you doing here? Like, you have a life. Like, I have a wife and I have kids and all that stuff. And my whole life, I've been kind of running an autopilot because a lot of the pain that I've had in the past, and in a way and in a sense, I kind of lost myself and became a shell of who I used to be. And only till recently, thanks to some friends that I've made, whom I wish were here today to share this story with, but I preferred not to for the sake of protecting them. I was born and raised in a third world country, and there has been a mixed bag between poverty and wealth in my family. My grandparents very well off, and my mother was a very spoiled child, and she has a lot of siblings, and they were really well off. We are all from Puerto Rico, from the southwest province of Lajas. So basically, my family was really well off, and they had some ties with some really shady organizations that did some pretty shady stuff. I can get into that later. What basically happened is that my family is all mostly white skinned. They are very prideful of being pure white skinned with some long history with the United States and some history somewhere, and I don't even remember, some country out there in the Europe areas. A lot of ties with that kind of people. I'm not discriminatory. I don't care. I don't see colors, but they clearly did see a lot of colors. My father is actually black. My grandparents did not like the fact that my father essentially forced himself on my mother on prom night. My mother was very drunk and she was a very spoiled child, and she didn't have the full maturity that a normal mother would have. So I grew up, it was difficult, but she did her best to cope with the family situation being so difficult. We managed to pull through. My mother tried being loving, but she lost herself when my father decided to leave for the military in the 80s. It's a lot of blur in that part. I remember my father telling me that he was going to come back. I was very little, maybe 6, 5, and he was our main source of income. And after my father left, my mom broke, and she started hanging out with some really unsavory people and doing a lot of drugs. And she went into like this downward spiral of abuse and whatnot. And I have several siblings, and my father had several kids with other women, and I also had another brother. We're like a tight little family where I took care of my siblings. I remember working a lot as a 9-year old, carrying sugarcane up hills, and I didn't have shoes. There were muddy hills, and I got hurt a lot. And I've been working for a really long time trying to, because my father always taught me that you needed to take care of your family and those you care about. So I've always worked really, really hard. I missed out on a lot of opportunities in life because of it, but I don't regret it. The fact that I worked so hard to bring some food to the table for my family. It wasn't just sugarcane, it was also coca leaves. There's an elaborate process on how cocaine is made. Cocaine is a very luxurious narcotic, and a lot of people will do a lot of things for it. There's a lot of organizations out there that operate very hush hush, and they do things that, like, they do these giant properties where they grow all this stuff, and it's like not sanctioned by the government, and essentially the government will like turn a blind eye. And I grew up in one of these properties because my family, or at least my grandparents' side, did not want anything to do with me because I was darker skinned than the rest of my family. So they kind of threw us out there, and I was living with the servants, quote unquote. But every time that there was some sort of social gathering where like the firstborn son, because that's like a tradition of the family or whatever, has to be present so they can introduce other families, kids, and they can like maybe they still do that nowadays. They still actually try to get kids to marry each other so they can continue the family businesses when it comes to this drug empire. So this is really hard. I'm trying my best here. Because of my mother's drug abuse, she beat the shit out of us a lot, and I got in the way a lot. She got involved with this man. Let's call him Mr. Rivera. That was his last name. Mr. Rivera wasn't a very nice man. He provided her with a lot of drugs, in exchange for her body and her services. And our house was often crowded with a lot of men in line to have sexual relations with her so she could get more drugs. And it wasn't a very pleasant thing to have my sister around. I remember when I was about 10, my uncle was a lot nicer than the rest of my family. So he came to spend a lot of time with us to take care of us because he felt bad because of his sister. My mom basically not being a good parent. So he tried to be a dad of sorts. And I remember this one time there was a raid. I'm guessing it was like an opposing faction of some sort came to our little property, and they came with guns and they kicked a lot of doors and started shooting a lot of people because they thought that we were like the laborers. They were trying to shut the facility down. And I remember my uncle telling me we're gonna go play hide and seek, and he pulled the floorboards from under the house. He put me, my siblings, and my little baby Javier brother, who's the youngest, and he told us to not come out because we would lose the game if we came out. The people came in and shot him. And I remember this overwhelming sense of fear and survival overcame me. And I remember everything that my dad taught me. If something like that happened, I needed to get out. So we waited several hours, and I crawled under the house and I dragged my siblings. And there was this big ditch that we used to have where the drainage and the sewage would go to because we didn't have proper plumbing, where we would throw sewage and waste. And the people were piling the bodies in the ditch, and it was an overwhelming smell of gasoline. And something in me told me that we needed to get out of there. So I had to hold my siblings, and there was this tiny little piece of wood. I remember this so distinctly that we used to cross over so we could get to like the other side where like a lot of the natural fruits and stuff and would grow because we had to eat off the land a lot. And I had to cross that bridge, and the only way to really maintain my balance was to look down, so I had to look down at the dead bodies. And my uncle was still gasping for air. I saw his body, and he was still gasping for air, and I could see his look of just despair. I'll never forget that. It's burned into my soul, into my memory, and it's the most painful thing I've ever experienced. One of the most painful things. And I remember telling my brothers and my sister, that telling them, please don't look down. We need to get out of here. Please don't look down. Telling them in Spanish, begging them. And I was the only one. I was determined that day to be the only one that would ever experience that pain because I didn't want my siblings to go through that. We went and hid in the woods for about a week. I remember hearing in the distance a lot of the night's gunshots and people still looking around. And there was this abandoned house made of wood. I don't even know how old. It was really deteriorated, tiny house. It was very deteriorated. We used to play hide and seek a lot there. So we took refuge in that house for like 3 or 4 days, and I was gathering mangoes from one of the groves that were nearby, and I remember hearing gunshots and my sister screaming. My two other brothers ran and they hid in the bushes, but my sister didn't make it out. And I saw this man, and he was on top of my sister, and he was trying to rip her clothing off. And he took his rifle and he threw it to the side, and he was telling her all kinds of horrible things in Spanish that I don't want to ever repeat. I was overcome with this blinding rage. I took his rifle with his bayonet, and it was the heaviest thing ever. Ran at him with it, and I stabbed him in the back several times. Give me 1 second. I remember the look on his face of just surprise and fear. He whispered things I didn't understand, but I had a feeling that he was trying to tell me he was sorry. Drugs are so horrible. It's because of drugs. Drugs is everything that has ruined my family's lives. These people would get so fucked up and high just so they could do what they're told. I remember 2 days after, I buried his body under a pile of rocks. I didn't make a marker or anything because I didn't know the guy, but I did my best. Oh, I'm actually sick. I remember going back because we ran out of food and the village was so empty. The town was just so empty. My mom was still there, and I saw my grandparents, and they were asking like, where the hell did we go and how come we left uncle behind. I don't want to say his name. And just people were just generally mad at us. Like, I couldn't understand, but I guess everything was quote unquote okay because they just told us to go back home like nothing happened. You expect me to go back home like nothing happened? It's just business as usual. And her coldness hit different. I've never experienced that, and I truly understood the severity of the stuff that I was involved in. because she must have seen some real shit to really know that, this is just a normal thing. So Don Rivera guy was now in charge of a lot of things because nobody else was left, and he decided to bring me and my siblings and my mom to his place because we had nowhere else to go. A lot of the houses got burnt down and they were rebuilding. So maybe a year or so of quiet because was away for working. He suddenly shows up. He's like demanding to be treated like a king of sorts. And then he asks me all kinds of questions about what she like what kind of food does she like. And I'm getting really suspicious, like, what are you trying to do? What are you gonna do? You're gonna take my sister away too? He literally grabbed me by the neck and he said, no, I'm gonna make her my wife. My blood ran cold and I'm thinking, like, you're gonna fuck up my sister too, like you fucked up my mom. And he says, what are you gonna do about it? I got into a huge fight with the guy. I hit him with everything I could find in the house and he hurt me so bad I could barely move. And he took off my clothing and he forced himself on me several times. And he told me that if I didn't want anything to happen to my sister or my siblings, that I had to be his bitch. And I agreed. And this went on for 2 or 3 years to the point where I actually started liking it. And I actively seeked it, and I didn't like that side about myself. Only then I found out that he was doing the same thing to my sister, but he was getting her really, really high to do it. So my sister was really mentally broken. I was so tempted to do the same thing. I just wanted to fucking end it all. I wanted to end myself. He found out because I called him. I told him, this is your fault. You killed my sister. You drove her to insanity. You're gonna fucking pay for everything you've done. He literally called the cleanup crew, and these people showed up at my house with tarps. They pulled her into a tarp. They literally rolled her lifeless body into like tarp, loaded her in the back of a truck, and never saw her body ever again. And that was so painful. Somehow on his own, he disappeared for I don't remember how many years, but he disappeared. And my mother was very upset about 2 weeks after he disappeared because she was still very addicted. She didn't have her drugs, so she was having her withdrawals, and she had these very strong sexual urges. So one night I was asleep in my bedroom. She came and she pushed me down on the bed, and she also took advantage of me. At this point in my life, I felt like I was just a fucking where everybody just wanted to fuck me. I was just a fucking everybody takes advantage of me. And I never had the balls to tell anybody no. Flash forward, I was sick of everything. So I told her that I was gonna contact the police and I was gonna tell her about everything that happened. I wanted to part ways and I wanted to stop what we were doing. She took advantage of me several times. She got so angry. She had this dragon jade ashtray that was given to her by the family, and she took it and she was so angry that she hit me in the forehead like 5 times and she nearly killed me. She gave me like this really bad prefrontal cortex injury. So now I have all these issues. I can't hold a pencil right. Used to be able to draw, and I used to be able to like love reading and all that stuff. And I have like a lot of issues with that kind of stuff now, and short term memory loss. Like I almost died. It was thanks to my youngest sibling who went to get some help that I was able to be saved. But my mother showed no remorse to wait later. My grandparents using the last bit of money that they had because they no longer were involved in this whole sketchy shit that was happening. Lord knows what underworld boss they were involved with. All I know is that some people died and they were not involved with that stuff anymore, but they still inherited a lot of money. And they had cars and properties and they have a mansion. They used a lot of this money to get one of the best South American surgeons that they know about. And this man was able to put my face together really well to the point where you can barely even notice that I have a scar. But that was like the first time that my grandparents actually showed a sign of slight care. My high school was really troubled because like all of this anger in me just surfaced, and I began like just fighting and fighting and fighting people just for the fun of it. I loved fighting and I was hurting so many people, and I got into a whole lot of trouble because of it. But I just had so much anger because people kept making fun of my sister, but people didn't know that my sister was already passed away. I repressed those memories. I thought my sister was still alive and well. But I relearned the truth. It's been the most painful thing ever. Despite all the fighting and stuff, I was able to pass high school relatively well. And I wanted to do some college. And my grandparents had some plans. They wanted me to go into like the law so that they could take advantage of me again. But I decided to do computing instead. And I learned how to mess with computers a lot. And I had a lot of hand me down parts. I built my own computer from the knowledge that I learned. And I started getting into the gaming a lot. And I met this wonderful person. She's my wife now. And I am super blessed to have her in my life. And I met her in an MMORPG called Ragnarok Online. She hates it when I talk about it like this, but to me, she's like a deity, like a god that came flying from heaven and came to save me because I was such a dark, corrupted person. And she was such a pure, kind-hearted person. And when I came to her life, I was so scared that like I would never be able to be with somebody like her. But she was so nice to me, and I kept talking to her and made a really good friendship. And we played a lot of video games together, and it was a journey. And I made friends and enemies along the way. But I remember telling her, opening up about some of my issues with her, and I feel like I was never 100% honest because I was scared that I would drive her away if she knew everything. But she understood, and we had a really good relationship. It's kind of cringe, but we used to use voice chat to sleep together so she could keep an eye on me and warn me if somebody came into my room, because my mother liked to come into my room at night to beat the shit out of me for no reason because she thought that I was to blame for everything that was wrong in her life. To me, that meant a lot. She was my bastion, my safety. And about 2 or 3 years into the relationship, I was hanging out with her and one of my best friends, and Mr. Rivera showed up out of nowhere. He was in prison for a very long time, and he came back to reclaim a little metal box that he claimed that he had. He claimed that he had some social security papers and some stuff that he needed so he could part ways, and he said he was a reformed man. And I was like, wow, like, do you honestly mean it? It's like, yes, I just want my stuff back so I can move on with my life. I'm really sorry for what I did. I went to prison. It's like, okay, cool. I mean, I guess. And we gave him his box back, and we never figured out how to open it because it was like a combination lock. And he opened it, and unbeknownst to me, he had a gun in it. So he came into my room, he aimed the gun at my head, and I heard the gunfire. And by the grace of the Lord, my wife was there, and she heard the gunfire, and my friend did too. Everybody freaked out. I thought I was dead. By the grace of the Lord, man, I don't know. I turned into a Christian real quick. That bullet got stuck in that barrel and it didn't hit me. But ever since that day, I feel like that old me in me kind of died because I should have been dead. I beat the ever living shit out of this guy like never before. I wasn't a kid anymore, and he was old and frail, and I feel sick to my stomach thinking that I let myself and my anger rule me like that. We contacted the police, and there was like a whole debacle over that, but basically he violated his parole and he was sent back to prison. Last I heard about him, he passed away in prison. He was very sick because of all the drugs he did. I guess he got what he deserved. But not too long after, me and her were talking, and we were still hanging out, and we're super happy, and she disappeared for like a month. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, it's about time, I guess not everything good is supposed to last. This is my destiny. I guess my life is all about suffering. She shows up out of nowhere and she tells me, hey, I have a friend who's going to lend me money so I can get you a plane ticket so we can get you the hell out of there. So the plan to escape was in motion. And it was such a big deal because my grandparents and my family didn't want me to leave. They had me on mental health care, even though I wasn't taking penny pills. They were taking the pills, and the pills were like I don't even know what kind of pills they were, but they were taking the pills to either use them or sell them or something. I don't know. So they were taking advantage of me with that too. But my aunt was super nice and she understood the situation, so she helped me get out. She helped me get out of there, and I boarded that plane, and it was the most surreal experience being able to just leave. I never thought I'd be able to leave. I don't know how to explain it. And then I arrived at the airport and she was there. I was so terrified because seeing her in person, I thought that she was the most purest, beautiful person in my life I've ever met. And seeing her in person was so shocking that I was so scared, and I tried hiding behind the pillar. She made fun of me for it. But it meant so much to me that she came after me too. didn't matter. She grabbed my hand, she yanked me into the car, and she squeezed my hand. And I was so happy. I had no words to describe how free I felt. You could have just rolled the credits there, man. That movie was done. It was the happiest fucking ending I had. You could have rolled the credits there. But coming over here to the States was really nice. I have a job. I've had a lot of jobs. I've been trying to cope with my problems. Little by little, I've been able to feel more as a human, being able to cope with my problems. I still have these really strong urges. My wife does her best to comfort me. But yeah, and coming here to the States was wonderful. I have two beautiful children, and she is the most important person in my life. But all of these memories, after like 15 years that we've been together, only now they finally come out. I don't know, man. It's just hard to live with trauma. I'm finally taking the steps to go to a proper therapy and proper psychologist and get this done, get this shadow off of me. For a little while, when my memories came back, I feel like I broke, I split, but my wife has been with me the entire time, and little by little, I managed to get my shit together, and I feel a whole lot better than I have ever. But after so many years of being with her and being in this really dark, depressed state, I feel like I hurt her. So now we're doing this journey of me being able to help her, and I want to save her from that darkness that remains. So this is like basically my little redemption arc now, because when I was with her and I had my kid for 8 years of my life, I was playing this other game called Planet Side 2, and all this like anger that I had in me, I just poured it into the game to the point where it was just really unhealthy. And I was trying really hard to become like an esports athlete, and I was doing all this aim trainer stuff and the Call of Duty, and I did get it some attentions from some really high profile people, but I ended up hurting myself because I overdid it. And instead of accepting it in a healthy way, I ended up lashing out at my family because I don't know, it was just something that I really wanted. And now that I was free, I was just voracious about it, but it wasn't fair. So I have this like constant guilt about it. But yeah, that's where I am now. I'm telling you this story because I don't care about the clout. I don't care about pity. I don't want anybody to pity me. I don't give a fuck about any of that. But I want people to know that there's a lot of people out there who have been sexually abused and they're never going to speak about it. People need to seek help. It took me 15 years to really realize how wrong I was in the head. And I've been just running on autopilot for a really long time. And only till recently now that I've come into VR and I've been able to like hang out with people with my same problems, I've been able to open up. So if you know anybody who's going through something similar, please tell them to get help, because a lot of people out there, they're hurting, and it's not okay to just stay hurt. It doesn't matter how guilty or filthy you feel, you really need to get some help.
I'm just next to you for a second, alright? If that's okay.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, dude.
I warned you.
Yeah, you did, but I just wasn't prepared.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Just, you are beyond incredible.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about that.
I don't know how to process it. It's just, you've been through so much and you survived.
Never give up.
I certainly wouldn't have. You're incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Give me a hug.
Come here.
Yeah. I try to be strong for everybody else, man. I try to be, because I know what it feels like. I know what pain feels like. I try to be there for people, you know. You never know. You don't know how they feel.
Hey, before we end off, I just got $1,000 from a sponsor segment for a previous video. Would you like to take your family on a trip somewhere?
I would actually use this money to pay some debts, to be honest with you.
You got it, man.
Thank you. That would help a lot.
It's the least I can do.
Thank you so much.
Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring.